All right. Um, so here we go. Constitution. So this is honestly the nice thing about this is it kind of covers some of the executive branch, some of the legislative. So when we get to those, that's a lot less work for us in the future. But for this one, we look at the basic breakdown of the Constitution or where it came from. We're looking at the Articles. That was the first form of our government, right? You guys have probably heard of this, especially in the more perfect union stuff, which I'm going to go over with you guys tomorrow. Just want to make sure everyone's here. So we'll spend some time tomorrow going over those. Oh, by the way, last week's quiz, very, very good. We averaged, let's see, it was, we finally got 100% on my question regarding the COVID policies. Well done. Congratulations. We were at 96%, 100%, 96%, 96%, 93%, 98%, 91%, 96, 96, 89, 93, 98, 100%, 91%, 87%, 100%, 95%, 93%. So then again, it was pretty straightforward vocab and a couple of things from the notes. So well done on that. Um, the um, the reason I show you about the articles is because we end up getting to the preamble of our current Constitution. Anybody have Crossy in here? All right. So Crossy, has he gone over the preamble with you guys? Because he used to make you guys memorize it. I'm not sure if he still does that or not. But he talks about it in regards to one of the perfect setups grammar-wise, regarding how to set up a intro, a supporting statements, and then your thesis statement. I mean, the whole setup. So regardless of that, from the preamble's perspective, so the first thing you see in the Constitution, right? So we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. So that phrase in and of itself, a more perfect union, keep in mind, we came from the Articles of Confederation. So we tried it that way. The best way to explain articles would be if you guys ever had a student teacher. Anybody ever here have a student teacher? Okay. Where you're supposed to kind of do what they say, but you know they're not really in charge. And so you know you could potentially get away with a little bit more with a student teacher. Or sometimes when there's a sub and you can kind of try to push the boundaries a little bit. It's kind of how I think of the Articles of Confederation. It was there and the government existed and they tried to control certain things, but they didn't really have anything to back it up. Right? So more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. So we're talking about, again, the security of the country, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. So what's another word for liberty? Freedom. Ensure your freedom, secure blessings of freedom to ourselves and our posterity. What is posterity? Yeah.
Maybe like being able to do
Think of people and who comes after them. Yeah.
Their values
Mm,
or what they own.
No, not really. I want to try to see if it connected, but it's not. That
Their
wasn't.
goals.
Mm-mm. Think of the people themselves, our posterity. Post
Have to provide.
all of my kids, grandchildren, great grandchildren, great grandchildren, right? So this is not just for us; it's for our posterity, for everyone following us gets these same liberties and freedoms. Do ordain, establish the Constitution for the United States of America, right? Right. So I'm trying to think if there was anything else. The general welfare. This is not like a welfare state. The welfare they're talking about here is just for the general good of everyone. So a place for you to become the best you can possibly be. Right. All right. The Constitution broken down. 27 amendments, which we've already gone over. I'm not going to spend any time on those because we've already talked about those. The articles, however, are broken out into different pieces, parts. So the first one we're going to talk about is the legislative branch, which is the Congress. That's the big chunk. The executive branch, presidency. Most of you guys are aware of that. Judicial branch. Article 4 talks about how the states are going to interact with each other, that relationship. Article 5 is how to change the Constitution, how to amend it, the whole process. Article 6, national debt, supremacy of the national law, oaths of office. Then Article 7 literally is this small little blurb saying, we're going to make this happen and this happen, and we're signing it. So when I look at different things too, some of these are just, Constitution, the legislative branch, this portion right here, that's the big, huge honker. It's huge. So let's see. So in this mini Constitution, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8.5. 8.5 pages for just the legislative branch. Right, there's a lot of rules, limitations. Executive branch, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 pages for the executive branch. Article 3, the Supreme Court, 1 1/4. Very generic, very open-ended. Article 4, 1 page, 1 1/4. Article 5, half a page. Article 6, half a page, 3/4 of a page. Article 7, 1/4 of a page. So the big meat's going to be up here. This is what that's the big stuff. Executive branch second big, and then judicial branch. Everything else is a little bit more, little blurbs as we go through. All right. What do we have in our legislative branch? We kind of stole some stuff. We're not very original. We just took what's already out there. We changed it to fit what we wanted. So what we ended up taking was the British Parliament's version, the House of Commons, House of Lords. Canada has the same thing, by the way. They just followed Britain or England to the T almost. So if we wanted to put it into our perspectives, and I'll just write this up here so you can write this if you want to. I'm not going to quiz you on it though. This would be our House of Representatives, and then this would be our Senate. So we thought that was a decent setup there, so we kind of followed that same. And the House of Commons, if you think about it, it's the commoners, it's the people. So when we look at the House of Representatives, same thing. There's a lot of more people in the House of Reps. The House of Lords is kind of your uppity. If you ever watched, by any chance, come across a House of Lords meeting, they're the ones that still have, like, sometimes the wigs on and the formal garments that they wear. Not all the time, but every once in a while, if they have, like, a formal meeting. Now, currently, all but 2 of the state legislatures have had 2 houses. Right? So 1787, Georgia, Pennsylvania, used to be unicameral. They did change over to a bicameral. Nebraska is the only state legislature still unicameral. So if you live in Nebraska, there's no 2 houses, it's just 1. Ohio has the Senate and the House, right? So we still have our bicameral. The practical reason, this kind of goes into the Great compromise between Virginia and New Jersey. The big issue that we had was you had the southern states. There's a little bit of irony in this one, by the way, because of the slaves. The southern states wanted to count the slaves as population because how much representation would they have if they counted the slaves as well compared to the northern states? Astronomical. They would control everything. So a little bit of irony is that the northern states were like, well, are we counting the slaves as 100%? This is where we come into that 3/5 compromise. We only counted as 3/5 of a person, not the whole person. Right? And then, so the argument was, well, what about New Jersey? Right? And this is where you have New Jersey versus Virginia. New Jersey was a small state. There was no way they could compete with Virginia. So that's what we came with the 2 houses. So Senate, 2 reps or 2 senators per state. House, based off of population. Right? So minimum, we have to have at least 3 senators. Right? So 435 members total. You're going to write this off to the side. You'll see some questions about this one. 435 is the total number in the House. and then 100 in the Senate, because right now we currently have 50 states. If we have 51 states, that'll change to 102. 52 states, 104. So every state gets 2, no matter what. One of the ones that always makes me question is, I believe it's Missouri or I have to look at Montana. I think it's Montana. Has 3 total people in Congress, 2 senators and 1 representative takes up the whole state, because the population is so small. It's the other states. What's that? I think it's Montana. Yeah. Yep. Is that it? No, Wyoming. All right, it was close. Montana's
That
it.
makes more sense.
Wyoming. Practical reasons. State is equally represented by the Senate, and the state's population represented by the House. Right? So you gotta get the best of both worlds. The other thing too that we did in the states was we made it 2 years. Every 2 years you're up for re-election, versus every 6 years for Senate. So House members, they can come and go very, very quickly. So right now our current rep is Andrew. I haven't talked about him in a while. He's what's that? No. It's Bob Gibbs and you looking it up? Yeah, Gonzalez. I got it. Anthony Gonzalez. And Gonzalez ran into a whole bunch. For those who aren't aware, whether you're happy or not, he voted. He was in favor of impeaching Trump the second time, and so he got a lot of fallout from that. And part of it is he's a young guy. He's probably in his late 30s, early 40s, and so he's like, I got a family, I got other stuff to do, and so he's not going to run again this fall. So there'll be a position open in our area. Bob Gibbs, if you have Bob Gibbs, he's an older gentleman. He's been in Congress for years. He's been in government for a long time. So, anyways, those guys every 2 years versus Sherrod Brown and Robert Portman. Robert Portman is our senator. He's up for re-election this year, but he's not going to run again either. He's done too. He just wants to live his life and go back into the private sector and get more money. So make a lot more there. And then we talk about some of the theoretical versions, right, in regards to why we want to do the 2 houses. One of the big ones is you will see a massive slowdown between the houses. So this is kind of how I perceive the House is like teenagers, and the Senate is kind of like parents. Right? So you guys have probably had moments in your life where like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna go there, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go with my friends, I'm gonna do that, and then your parents go, okay, question. Who's going to be at the house with you? What time are you coming home? What's the phone number of how I can get a hold? Who, like, where is this house? Right. So when we look at the differences, the house tends to be really quick. And let's go ahead. Let's pass it. Let's go. At one point, if you've ever heard Miss Nancy Pelosi, at one point, this was back when Obama was in office, President Obama, she made the comment they were trying to pass something, and she said, "Well, we just need to pass it so we can find out what's in it," which is kind of a weird thing to say when you're. And that's when the Senate was like, okay, wait, what did you just say? You want to pass it and then find out what's in it? Why don't we slow this down a little bit? So you'll theoretically, this is one of the big, huge issues by the 2 houses. One's fast, the other one slows everything down. Right? Sometimes the Senate's like the party pooper. Like you're like that. In regards to representation, this was a good example I was talking about. Right, so both states have 2. But regarding population, 578,880, it's only going to get you 1 House member versus California has 39 million, almost 40 million. So they're up to 53. And this is actually changing. Let me see if I can find a up-to-date electoral votes. Because that's changing as well. We're actually losing more representation in our next election in 2022. Yeah, or 2020. 2024. Yeah. Is it 2022? I think it's 2022. I think this year we're losing reps in the House. It's going to change our map. Yeah, so here is our current breakdown. Right, so Maine and Nebraska are kind of the only oddballs out, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But you'll see here, Ohio has 18 votes, Florida has 29 votes, Texas has 38. California, is that still 50? Is that 55? Yeah, 55 votes. So we're looking for that. This website, by the way, is 270 to win. We need 270 votes to win the presidency. So those are our electoral votes. But I'm curious if 2024. See how though we've changed our numbers. So Ohio is now 17. 2024, yeah. California has gone up a little bit. Florida's gone up a little bit. California has lost a vote. They're down to 54. So you see some changes here because of representation. So people literally have moved out of Ohio and gone probably to Florida or down to Georgia. Right? People have left California. That was actually a big, huge concern for Californians. There's lots of people who were leaving. Texas is good. It's almost like a big mass exodus from California to Texas. So you're seeing some changes in those numbers. Still 3. South Dakota, North Dakota, 3. Maine and as I pointed out, Nebraska and Maine, they do a different representation, which I'll explain more. So you can split your votes. In Ohio, the way we have our current law set up, if you win Ohio by just one vote, you get all 17 electoral votes in 2024. Versus Nebraska, they did it proportionally. So let's say that Biden and Trump run again against each other, and Trump gets 3/4 of the votes, or let's say 4/5 of the votes. He would get 4 of the electoral votes, and Biden would get 1 of the electoral votes, which is probably a decent compromise. And again, we'll talk more later on about that. All right. Good. All right. Article 1, check. Article 2. So this is the most up-to-date presidential list I have on the right. I did update it, thank goodness. The one issue we ran into with the executive branch, it's very, very open-ended. There's lots of stuff in there that says, yeah, you should do this, but it has nothing in regards to how to do this. So one of the things that we're finding out is that the executive branch has a lot of power because there's not as many limitations in the Constitution. It's very, very open-ended in certain aspects. We do know that the president is the commander-in-chief, right? So the military, the buck stops with the president. The president can make treaties, but can't enforce them until the Senate approves them. But I can make treaties. Approve or veto acts of Congress. Special session, that's a fun one we'll talk about a little bit later on. Ambassadors. Right? And then the other thing too is you'll hear the executive branch executes the law. Right? So they're the police officers. Right? So if we look at City of Brunswick and they pass a law for City of Brunswick, well then the police have to enforce it. And the mayor has to follow up and make sure that those laws are enforced. That's the same thing with the legislative branch and president. Right? Congress makes the laws, president has to enforce it, whether they like it or not. And that's a big, huge discussion. Because I know during President Obama's time in office, and Trump did the same thing, you're starting to see it with Biden. The legislative branch is passing this law. You don't get a choice. You've got to enforce all of it. So you're starting to see little chinks in the armor that way. All right. This is where I was talking about the most loosely drawn chapter. No definition of the executive power. Originally, we wanted to discuss a weak presidency. This is actually that Hamilton question. Remember, we were talking about Hamilton wanted to make it almost like a monarchy again. He was for the stronger government. Everyone else was just scared. They didn't want another king. So we had the weaker version versus the stronger. In the end, the stronger version won out. So we're looking at right now, even compared to our original intent, is even way stronger. One of the things that you run into, without getting too complicated, is starting with Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt. They both kind of looked at the presidency as this is the beginning of the progressive movement. If you guys have ever heard that, I know I had it up on the notes in the last section. Progressive movement, where the president started looking at this, going, "Well, the people voted for me, therefore, I should do more and take more control." Right. So we have this checks and balances, which we'll talk about. But Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt started kind of going, "Yeah, but I'm in charge here. They voted for me, so I should do more to take control." So you start to see more executive agencies created, executive branch, executive decisions, executive treaties. There's all sorts of more increased power by the presidency, starting with that guy right there, the middle one. Where's my cursor? Come on, cursor. Hello. Oh,
Just
thank you.
the stragglers.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Yes, come on. Not my cursor. Where is it? Don't even let me touch it now. It's afraid of me. There we go. All right. Judicial branch. I'll show you guys a picture of the current Supreme Court here in a second. All right, so this is actually one of the things I think was in the More Perfect Union too. The judicial branch came about because there was a fear that there was no interpretation. There was no place for the people to go. So if we voted for our reps, we had 2 years to wait. Voted for our president, we had 4 years to wait. Voted for our Senate, we had 6 years to wait. Who could we go to right now that would go, "Oh, yeah, you're right. That law isn't fair. Oh, yeah, you're right. That's isolating one group. Oh, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't be doing that. That's illegal. Well, we got to change those laws." That was where Hamilton was talking about the Supreme Court. So laws are a dead letter without courts to expound and define their true meaning and operation. Again, if you guys have an issue with the law, who do you have to go to first? It has to go to a court. And then you can appeal it, and you can appeal it, and appeal it. And eventually, the Supreme Court or the state courts can make some changes. Or they can immediately, this happened a couple times with President Biden and with President Trump and President Obama. There were courts that came out and said, "No, that's illegal. You can't do that." And right away. If you guys remember, the more popular one was when President Trump was in office and he stopped, I think it was travel from, I think it was 6 countries that he had listed. And the courts were like, "You can't do that. You're allowed to come into the country." Does anyone remember any of that? Because at one point people were a little stuck in the airport, so they couldn't go outside the airport. And there was all sorts of that going on. The courts were the ones that stepped in and said, "No. You're not allowed to do that. It's too much power." So he tried to reword it, didn't work. Tried to reword it, didn't work. So he finally went away. So again, that was the court system. Now the Congress does have the ability to adjust or create inferior courts and add or subtract people to the current court. So this is our current court right now. The gentleman that is retiring is this guy right here. So he was the one, I think I mentioned this to you guys a couple weeks ago. He was going to announce his retirement, and all of a sudden they came out and said, "We have a new appointment. We're going to put in the black female for Supreme Court, but we're going to wait until he resigns from his position." Well, some of the people that were talking to him were like, "Well, he didn't know he was resigning or retiring. Apparently he's retiring." Right. So, but that's Anthony Kennedy. So we have, and just to give you guys a background of the breakdown of the makeup of the court, and we'll go more detail later on, appointed by a Republican, appointed by a Republican, appointed by a Republican, appointed by a Democrat, by a Democrat, by a Republican, by a Republican, by a Democrat, by a Republican. Right? So we're talking about the courts being swaying one way. Now I will say that this guy and this guy and this guy have been kind of middle of the road. There were certain things that everyone thought, oh, he's going to vote conservative. He's going to vote for the Republicans. And he voted like for Affordable Care Act. Everyone thought he was going to be like, no, it's illegal. You can't do that. There's reasons why. But he came out and said, no, it's legal as long as you do it this way. So people were like, oh, man, why'd you say that? So one of the things, however, that he did say was President Obama had been saying to everyone, it's not a tax, it's not a tax, it's not a tax, it's not a tax. And he came out and said the only way it's going to be legal is if it's a tax. Because the Congress can't do that. They can't do it if it's not a tax. So that was one. And then there was another one. This guy, everyone was saying that he was going to be very, very conservative. But there was a Family Leave Act, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, that he was involved with. And he was one of the deciding votes. And he voted for the LGBTQ community to be included in the Family Leave Act. Everyone thought he was going to be like, nope, that's not allowed. Nope, that's not allowed. But he was for it. So it passed partly because this guy, who everyone thought he was going to be conservative, very conservative in his thoughts, went with more of a liberal ideology on that one. And then this guy right here, one of the reasons why I think they probably were looking to potentially get rid of him, the reason I put a question mark, if that's what it is, that's a better question mark, was the fact that he kind of swung back and forth. He was sometimes he'd be conservative, sometimes he'd be more liberal. Right? But these three right here, these two, almost all the time they're going to vote for sure towards the more liberal or activist position, which we'll talk about later on. So that's your current. This gentleman is the oldest one on the court, but this is kind of a weird situation too. He will never be Chief Justice. It has nothing to do with your age. It's the position. So Justice Roberts is the current Chief Justice. When he resigns or retires, whoever takes his position will become the next Chief Justice. So Clarence Thomas can't become the Chief Justice because he's already just a judge or a justice on the team. So whoever takes his position would be the next Chief Justice. It's kind of an interesting way they do it. All right.
Back to 5.
Right here? Yep. Okay. I can move in more. I can move a lot. No problem. You good? Awesome. All right. Good. All right. The size of the judiciary is huge, though. This is one of the things we don't typically know about. There are 100 courts, right? National judicial courts, 100 of them. There are 50 state judiciaries. So every state has their own Supreme Court. Most everything that happens at the state level. The federal courts, if you make it there, that's a rarity. The Supreme Court picks and chooses too. So they don't take all the cases. They'll look at like maybe 10 or 15 in a year. And typically every June, they rule on 3 or 4. And the other ones might be delayed a while. And then there's all sorts of other courts. A lot. Sometimes called regular courts or Article 3 courts, Court of Appeals, district courts. Then they get more specific. International trade. I might lose more of you guys right now. So calm. Good. All right. A couple other inferior courts, special courts, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, veterans claims. This was a big one when we were having the issues with the VA hospitals and a lot of the issues with those. Federal claims, U.S. tax court, terrorist courts, courts district. And keep in mind, District of Columbia is its own little enclave, so they get their own, their own court system. And if you don't want everyone to go to court, send them to Guantanamo Bay. That's been an issue. Well, I think when President Obama took office, there was a lot of people. It's one of those things where I think when the presidents take office, they run on certain things. If you guys remember when President Obama, you guys were too, you might. President Obama was running. He was talking. I'm shutting down. Shutting it down. Shutting Guantanamo Bay down. Shutting it down. I'm shutting it down. It's part of his whole campaign promise. And then when he took office, he tried to shut it down. They tried to send one of the cases, like one of the terrorists, up to New York. And the people of New York went, wait a second. Because everyone thought, well, this is good. New York can try this terrorist who was part of the group that's knocked down the towers in their own courts in the city of New York. But the people then found out that they had to house them. They had to provide them lawyers. They had to pay for their food. They had to pay for all of their and then the appeals process would be years and years and years. So they're like, no. So most of the people in New York actually was like massive outreach to the governors to like, please get them out of here. We don't want them up here. We don't want to provide them anything. So a lot of them were sent back to Guantanamo Bay. But President Trump, not so much. President Biden didn't even bring it up because keep in mind he was vice president at the time that Obama said, I'm going to shut it down. And imagine once they took office, they went, oh, that's why we have to have it. So there may be some more reasons for having it. The biggest issue they have with Guantanamo Bay was it's military tribunals and military courts, not our courts. So there was a fear of unfair trials. There was the potential for not terrorism. What's the word I'm looking for? What's that? Not war crimes. It's waterboarding, torture. That was the fear they had for people that were in Guantanamo Bay. It was not technically U.S. soil. It was a military base, so it was a military situation. Yeah. What? Is it? Okay. All right, a couple principles of our Constitution that we look at. And these, the reason I have the coin, they're the same side of they're the opposite side of the same coin, right? Popular sovereignty, which is us. Like, we are the ones that vote for everything. We are the ones that allow things to happen. I think one of the big issues that we have run into, especially currently, especially the last election, in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, is we feel like the government has gotten so large that we feel like we have no control anymore. It's almost like the snowball that has now grown into the big, huge, massive snowball avalanche now going down. Like, how do you stop this? But the basic idea Madison is talking about is republicanism. Not the Republican Party, but the Republic. Rule of law. Right? The fact that our country is supposed to be based off of the rule of law. On the other side of that same coin, we look at limiting the government. Rule of law. They can only do what we allow them to do. This is the argument I think people are having for our government getting a little bit out of control recently. There was actually one, I'm not sure if I told you guys about this one. If I did, please, someone stop me. The state of Ohio passed legislation right before the shutdown that took away our ability to get information from the Freedom of Information Act. Did I tell you guys about this one?
I don't think so.
So right, literally, one of the pieces of legislation that went out that almost everyone passed from just from Ohio level, not the federal level, but Ohio General Assembly, was the legislation stated that the government would not have to provide information regarding COVID results or COVID information until 6 months after the COVID pandemic had come to an end, or the government decided they were willing to provide the information. I have to go back and look at the actual wording. Because what happened was my sister's company contacted the state of Ohio and said, we want the information. Because you guys remember, slow down, get the curve, we don't want the spike. And they were quoting the numbers of what would happen numbers wise. And so my sister's employer reached out and said, hey, where did you get your information? Like, where did you get that number for this massive spike so that we can look at it? And they said, well, we don't have to give you anything based off of this piece of legislation. So what we ended up finding out was that the legislators didn't even know it was in there. They had thrown it in the last second. So now, those who are aware, we have changed that law. That is gone. And now anything that the governor wants to do has to go through Congress first. They have to approve it, and then it can become law. So remember all those health mandates and shutdowns? Now it has to go through Congress first, and then they can make it law. I was going to stop anyways, so fine. Go ahead and put your notes away. There's my cursor. It's okay. I know the feeling.